Hey everyone, we are a part of Consent Peer Education team here on campus, and I'm Vikrant.
I'm Stacey.
And I'm Vicky.
And today we are going to talk about international students and mental health.
I don't know if you guys have any opinions, but I feel like this topic is just really important for in our line of work because we're here to help students through a lot of their struggles with consent on campus, and that also ties into a lot with mental health because anyone who's like a survivor tends to have difficulties working through that issue, and we're here to support them. And I feel like international students are underrepresented in this category and in this topic.
Yeah, I just believe that mental health is such a huge part of our lives. So my educational background is in behavioral science, and basically it's a branch of psychology. So I've been studying a lot around like challenges in mental health, some developmental challenges that can be faced by students with aligning with mental health. So I do support mental health and well-being as a spheres just because it is so much value in them, and you cannot really underestimate the importance in your lives. So yeah, I'm so happy to talk around this sphere today. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and even I feel in my community, I've seen a lot of things, and I feel that if we will be able to guide international students in a better way to accessing mental health resources, then they would not find solace in unhealthy coping mechanism.
Yeah. So I feel like with all that, that kind of leads us well into our first topic of today, which is recognizing mental health issues. So I was reading this one article. It was in Australia, so it was on Australian university students. And it talked about how international students scored predominantly lower on the ranges of depression recognition and awareness for evidence based forms of help, which basically means that they were less likely than domestic students to identify depression within themselves and others. And a lot of these respondents overall indicated that they would seek help if experiencing a problem. However, from all those students, the international ones were less likely to report for themselves. And if from those that did seek support, most of them would only look for university based interventions. So I don't know if you guys have any ideas as to maybe why that could be. I feel like maybe it's because just if they're living on residence and they're on campus, this is kind of just what they know, and it's harder to find resources outside.
yeah, I can basically reflect on my experience just integrating this study findings. So, when I was moving to Canada like 2 years ago, the whole immigration process is very harsh near mental health. And it took me the whole year to recognize that actually I was in depression for a few months just because um, while I was migrating, adapting to like school settings, to a new environment, trying to find what should I do, basically, how to connect with my peers, you thought at that moment that it is just part of integration process, right? But then when time goes and you try to evaluate how it was, then you can see like, okay, I had a lot of challenges, and like, okay, I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't eating well, I didn't really get a chance to rest, to walk, to enjoy my life. So I was like in this constant, I would say, depression mood, and like I was very anxious. I was under stress all the time, like for consecutive 4 months. And I didn't search for any resources, to be honest. It just took me some time to kind of overcome these difficulties on my own. But I can see how all these findings can definitely reflect on the student experience, on their perspectives, on their not ability to recognize these mental health issues itself, just because you are thinking, okay, basically, maybe it's not really my mental health, it's just all the things around me. So maybe it's not that much dealing with me directly, but then as time goes, you can see, like, okay, that was really part of me struggling with my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
According to your question, people do really find comfortable especially international students really find comfortable using colleges resources because that's the only thing that they have known to trust in the new country. I feel
Mhm.
that I'm going to be more inclined towards going to SWAC and consulting doctors at SWAC instead of just walking up to a walk-in clinic because we don't know. It is the familiarity aspect that I think comes in at this point. And as international students, we are really in a very vulnerable state. I think a- anywhere or at any time, we are constantly at a fight or flight mode because we don't have a safety net here. We have to we have to be our own safety net.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good point, and it kind of ties into this need to address help-seeking behavior because in that same study, like they were talking about how only 50% of international students recognized non-university professional sources as helpful compared to 86.3% of domestic students. So that's a huge gap. So the domestic students are able to recognize all these other outside resources, whereas only half of the international students can recognize it as helpful. It's not even that they could list off the top of their head. The idea was that they had a list, and from that list, they named what they thought would actually be beneficial to them, and it was mostly just university resources.
Yeah, and I also feel like it comes to a point where international students, they don't really know where to start searching for help. So even we're talking directly in terms of on-campus resources, right? Humber have a lot of different faculties. Yes, we do have SWAC. Under SWAC, we have counseling. We do have medical, nurses, doctors, appointments regarding our health. But I was talking to some students who was really surprised to know like we have the whole faculty in terms of like supporting like services for students. So I feel like for international students, it also comes to a point where they have to find this initial point where to get the resource from, or like to know knowledge where to guide themselves through the resources. And I feel like international center can be like the best option, maybe just to inquire where I can find some mental health support, where can I find some counseling services. So even within on-campus resources, I feel like sometimes there is like this visible struggle of getting these internal resources.
Mhm. I have a question for you guys. Uh, I was just thinking about how maybe it would be helpful if during an orientation there would be like a list of resources for international students. And I was curious if you guys had anything like that when you came to the university, if you were ever told about these resources or were given an information card, something like that.
So my first experience of having resource cards were at a services fair on the first day of orientation. I went to a services fair. I went to each and every desk and tried to inquire about it. But it was still pretty, ambiguous for me because I didn't really understand what these resources were. Because as an international student, I'm coming into a totally different culture. So even the colleges have a totally different culture. Back home, our colleges don't have all these kinds of things. So it was really confusing for me, even to know that they were resources. And it took me a little bit of time to understand that, oh, the colleges have all these things, and now I can use them. So I think a better orientation and I think the people who are at the orientation should be able to list off what even our health insurance covers or what our uh, what resources that we can use in college, and making a comprehensive list of things or comprehensive resources that we can use instead of having individual service desks. For example, if one person goes at a service desk and they're out of resource cards, so it'll be difficult for them to manage everything at once. So I think a comprehensive list of resources that they can use uh, will be very beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, I can totally agree, Vikrant, on your point. Just because when I was during my first orientation, I was walking through all these tables and I was trying to find, okay, what's going on? Just because there are like dozen tables, people try to promote Humber's resources, but at the same very time, you don't really following them, like promoting the
Yeah.
resources. So maybe having just one card with all the swag, with all the public safety, like these safe walks with everything on just one card can be a huge help. Just because having like 10 different informative cards with you maybe not really an option sometimes. And also it took me as well some time to navigate through all the Humber resources. And actually once I got a job at one of the Humber resources, I was like, okay, finally I know all the options available for students. But the thing with the insurance, yeah, totally agree with you, Vikrant, as well. Just because students have these questions around insurance, and I do some background in terms of like how I personally address like some of the dental care, some of the counseling, but I'm not knowledgeable enough. So maybe having just one like two-person, I'm not sure like from more care or like from the insurance itself, just to give this guidance. Okay, yes, you can definitely take a look on the like on their official site and everything, but sometimes it's not that obvious. Like sometimes your case may be like a little bit more complicated than the list, and you do have like a lot of questions. Their online chat is a great help, to be honest, but still you have to put a lot of effort to figure out like some basic stuff in terms of like your well-being and your health. That is just frustrating.
Mm-hmm. As a domestic student, I have my own issues with like insurance and figuring it out. Just like I don't know, where does this go? Who do I talk to for this? And where do I do that? I have to go on this website. I have to call this person now. And like no one explains it to you. So I can't even imagine how it must be as an international student being expected to do all those same things, but also either having like a language barrier or it's like different culture coming in and just having no idea what's going on to begin with. You're having so many new experiences, and the last thing you need is an additional issue going on, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like it would be beneficial to have, like you were saying, one big list, and also maybe having someone to help guide a little. Like for myself, my campus at Humber is much smaller. I'm at Guelph Humber, and so it's a much smaller campus. So we have first year experience where they often are paired with a group of first years, and so I had like a first year mentor, and their job is mostly like if I have a question, I could just send them a message on Teams like where can I find this, and they can respond. And I know that Humber North and Humber Lake are much bigger, and so that might be a little bit more difficult. However, it would be interesting to have something like that, someone that you can just send to Teams, not someone that you have to walk all the way to their office and go out of your way of, but someone who's convenient that you can just message like, hey, what can I do for this? And they can say, oh, just go to the international center or go to the tax clinic or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I would also like to add when the recognizability aspect comes in, like even recognizing that you are having anxiety or depression, because I think a lot of international students come from a culture that does not recognize uh, anxiety or depression. And I really, there are a lot of times where people have told me that, oh, these are only rich people's problems, anxiety and depression. Because, but I feel that everyone does have these problems. It is just that they don't recognize it that way.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's amazing, Vikrant, that you brought up this discrimination part in like addressing mental health and recognition. I
Yeah,
feel like in my culture back in Russia, like my parents, my grandparents, they don't really put that much significance and value in your well-being in terms of like, oh, you're probably just tired, you're not anxious, or you're not, obviously, you're not depressed. Like everything is perfect. How it can be depression in your life? So, this underestimating and underrating your like personal experiences, like your life, how things can be really challenging, is a huge part. And especially when you're an international student abroad, it's even like this gap between your parents, yourself, it's even larger in this scale. So you try to basically, I try to say that everything is fine, just not to upset them, just for them not to stress, so they can focus on their own life. And you cannot really share like what's going on just because you know that they will be frightened, basically. Just, okay, we cannot really help you, what should we do? So you're just
Yeah.
saying that everything is a mess and they are just, okay, they are just freaking out. So that's a huge part as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I relate to it more than anyone else can.
Yeah. I just hearing tidbits from like friends and stuff starting to immigrate here and everything. I remember having people talk to me about what's difficult. It's a bit as what you were saying. It's almost like in two different worlds where you have your friends back at home and then you try to talk to them and they just don't understand because they're still at home with that same culture and the same mindset, whereas you're now over here and you're starting to immigrate, you're starting to pick up on different things and you're feeling these things they're not understanding as well. And I've had people talk to me about how, yeah, they'll kind of be dismissed, as you were saying, like the rich people problem type of thing, or they're almost their feelings are diminished a bit because it's, you have this great opportunity to be in a new country, why are you
Hmm.
complaining, right? But
Yeah.
you know, even if it's a great opportunity, there's still a lot of difficulties that come with it, and you're facing a lot of these people are facing it alone, pretty much.
Hmm. And also, a lot of students from my community, for example, students who come from India, a lot of them do not come well prepared, I think, financially. So they have to come here, do jobs. Some people even do two jobs while working full time just to support themselves in this economy. And I think that is just an added burden to them in the face of adversity.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely having like this extra workload on top of your studies is just like insane in terms of dealing and trying to manage all the aspects of your life. Yeah, I can't even imagine repeating my experience as well, so can totally relate to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you were saying, that yeah, some people are living almost check by check, trying to pay for tuition, their food, for residence, and everything. They're taking on two jobs, and then if something were to happen, some emergency, there's just a little bit of there's just a little bit of payment from insurance, and then there's suddenly everything's thrown off, right? So
Hmm.
I feel like this might be a good time to maybe move on a little bit onto talking about discrimination of, with international students and how that affects their mental health. I feel like there's a little bit of difficulty accessing mental health resources with Indigenous students, certain international students, just because there's sometimes don't, well, as we were talking about, don't know about the resources on campus. They're not as well advertised to international students. And also sometimes there's like language barriers. And even though we do offer translators at times, people don't want to have a translator in the room. That's another person listening to you spill these really difficult feelings out, right? So there's that.
Yeah, and also I was reading the same article as you mentioned before in terms of Australian students, and they were also mentioning that like this feeling of shame that is your second language is not that perfect as your native language, and accessing these services is just brought up this point that you are not that fluent in your second language, like accessing all these resources by the professionals who are like excelling in the English, and this feeling this challenges is not something that people prefer experiencing while they facing these mental health challenges, basically. And I can totally relate. Sometimes if you want to avoid just extra stress in your life, you try to address all the challenges by yourself, not trying to seek for extra support, basically, really.
Mhm.
that is absolutely true. Being imperfect in your second language, and especially in India, due to British colonization, English is still considered as a as an elite language. So it doesn't matter if you're intelligent or not. Your intelligence is uh, only based on the fact that you know English or you can articulate your thoughts in English. And I think that's a really myopic way of seeing things, of measuring intelligence. But it is socially unacceptable or looked down upon if someone speaks imperfect English. They're made fun of.
Mm.
And yeah, so all this just compounds when someone goes to study abroad in an English speaking country.
Right. Yeah, it seems like there's already it's already such a vulnerable experience to go talk to a mental health professional or to seek help. And it sounds like it's even more of a vulnerable experience for international students because then you're you're pointing out how there might be this language barrier or just this difficulty trying to seek help. So yeah, that I can definitely see how that is much more difficult. I wanted to touch a little bit as well about the maybe the increase of loneliness as well when it comes to trying to seek out mental health and trying to reach out. I know we were talking about it before, how you have family at home and friends at home, but also just trying to reach out here. Like there might not be as many opportunities to be meeting new people just because as you guys were mentioning there's multiple jobs and then there's school and then there's all these busy things going on and then it's when do you have the time to go out and find these new people, when do you have time to find these mental health resources? So it's really hard to it's a lot of responsibility on the individual, right?
Yeah, but it is
Yeah.
kind of part of adulthood, like when you take this responsibility and try to deal with all these challenges. Basically, I was trying my best to find like new friends to connect with peers during my first and second year here. And once you know people, once you have your own like friend group, community, when you have someone who's really, really close to you, you basically don't feel that much lonely, I would say. So I'm pretty much fine with my friends right now. I'm not that fan of parties anymore, just because it is very exhausting. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort meeting new people, trying to know them better. And maybe I'm at this point of my life when I'm not that much focused on getting new people in my life just because I have enough right now. So maybe dealing with loneliness, it's something that you can take charge of, basically, just because I would say it depends on you, like on your actions, on your attitudes, on your perception, how to get these new people in your life, basically all these like small tricks and tips and how to get this communication in the right way and just to be closer with a new person, basically. But definitely having your family far away, having your like childhood friends, your high school friends far away is a big portion of feeling lonely for the first like couple of years. But it is something that you have to be mentally prepared for. Just because you are migrating, that is part of the process, basically.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I feel that uh, as as I made friends and family, I had to start from a scratch.
Yeah.
Uh, but I felt that in my international student friend group, I think everyone is so concerned about each other that I have a really good uh, support system. I found a really good support system in there because everyone knows what everyone might be going through, what everyone might be feeling. So I think that's a relief. And fortunately, I have great friends to help me uh, support myself better.
Maybe hearing about this would help anyone listening who's going through kind of that loneliness stage right now. What were some of the easiest ways you guys found to meet new people and how are you able to make these new connections, I suppose?
Mm, I can go first. So basically, for me, Instagram helped a lot. So I just had a few friends who were here for some time. I basically texted them through Instagram, we connected. Then they also introduced me to their friend group, and I've been for a few parties, for a few times just hanging out with these people, and then you can basically get who you can be close with or who's not really aligning with your life perspectives, I would say. And then it just takes time to establish these connections with the people you feel close to enough. Um, but yeah, I know that some of my friends, once I landed here, also migrated here. So it's just easier as time goes. But for me, Instagram helped a lot, and some university college students who we were close to like since the very beginning, my classmates. So basically, these are my two friend groups.
Mm.
So for me, it was mostly people from my own course, and with all the for initially no one had any jobs or anything else to do, so we would really go out every day after classes, and we would socialize a lot after our classes ended, and that is the best friend group I have had in this country, because uh, we are together since the first semester, and we take the same classes. We took the we split up a lot, but we are still in contact with each other, and we can be there for anyone when anyone reaches out. So I would like to say to people that if someone is facing this issue, or if someone is feeling lonely in their life, you can just try to reach out to people. And I know where social anxiety comes in. What will they think? But at times you have to put yourself out there in a little bit uncomfortable situations to to get to know people. They're not all that bad.
Yeah, I can definitely agree on the point that waiting in your own room for something good to happen is not really the way out of this situation. You can try to search for new hobbies, for something that maybe you've been passionate for some time, but you didn't get a chance to. I've been attending some workshops regarding dancing, and I've been able to meet new people there. It's more like this whole atmosphere there is more like informal, unconventional. You're not that obligated to meet new people, but you can just like ask them, hey, like what's up, what are you doing, basically, and then just connect
Mhm.
with them. It don't have to be that like official, formal, exhausting. You can try to find your own ways how to meet these new people.
Yeah. So, for example, doing any hobbies, going to the gym, or doing some finding your niche will lead to better connections with people. That's what I feel.
Yeah, I for sure think that there's a lot of outside ways of finding connections, like going to clubs, like you said, going to the gym and doing these like extra steps. So there is some extra effort that has to be there. But you also touched on, and I think which is also really important, there's also ways to like kind of kill two birds in one stone. So how you were saying making friends in class, like you already have to go to class, right? So finding friends in there, then it's not as much as extra responsibility, because then
Yeah.
there's other ways to do it. Like there's ways to go out of your normal routine, but there's also ways to find people within your normal routine as well, which is I think quite interesting.
Yeah. I would like to add something. It just hit my mind that it may also be the cultural difference that people feel so isolated, because we come from a collectivist culture
Mhm.
to a country that is very egalitarian or individualistic. And
Mhm.
that's where I think the conflict happens.
Mhm.
Everyone over there, everyone has community. Everyone is a part of community. They have a lot of people around. They don't even realize that they are constantly around people. They don't get a lot of alone time. And here, everything you have to do on your own is, I think, what a really big shock would be for people.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Vikrant. I completely agree. I do think that even just in classes and like how people make friends, at least from a domestic student standpoint, it is very much like you don't typically see huge groups of people piling together. It's usually like people on their own or maybe with one friend, two friends, and that could be a little bit intimidating sometimes if you're
Mhm.
trying to go out and make friends, like going up to this one person compared to if you already see a big group of friendly people, right? And I can see how that can make it a little bit more difficult to make friends and to make connections just because yeah, everyone's like always like either by themselves. It's very individualized.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm. So on that point, I know it's a little bit of a flip, but I feel like it is important that we talk about campus sexual violence and mental health just because of our line of work. We here at CPEP,
Mm.
Consent Peer Education Program, we do talk a lot about sexual violence, and I feel like it's important to touch on how that may be how the experiences of international students may be different than domestic students. So I feel like as we've been talking throughout this whole podcast, it is important to talk about how international students have unique challenges such as cultural adjustment, language barriers, discrimination, social isolation, and all these things kind of increase their vulnerability to sexual violence. So I don't know if either of you have any opinions about that, why they might that might be, or anything like that.
I can go first. I just believe that international students, as we mentioned before, experience a lot of challenges in terms of their well-being, in terms of like external circumstances of their migration. And at this point of their life, when everything is pretty unstable, like you don't have any stability in your life, you are in these shoes of being that vulnerable for sexual abuse, sexual assault, or any violence towards you. Um, so I feel like even getting mm, this external help from like faculty, staff, from on campus resources can be a big challenge, just because disclosing can also be a very harsh experience itself. Not, as we know, like not all the victims do wanna went through all the process, all these obligations, and disclosure part itself. So we do really have to take into consideration that under the circumstances of being international students, you are very vulnerable to various forms of abuse, but also dealing with these forms of abuse can be a whole challenge in terms of them, like students addressing this issue and like the support staff, like consent education, coordination through the wellness is also a big challenge.
Mhm.
Yes, and that's also what all the things that we talked about mental health coincides with even sexual violence. I think lack of recognition of sexual violence. Some people might be even having trouble uh, uh, articulating or recognizing what sexual violence looks like. So we that's where our efforts come in to educate people. And also there is a lot of uh, as we said, there is a lot of loneliness. So people are also very prone to find solace in one person. They desperately seek out people to go out with just to have uh, just to not feel lonely. And I think that's an unhealthy coping mechanism. And that's where I think even they would have trouble dealing with sexual violence because they'd end up losing contact with that person if they come out and say something.
And also coming from different religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds is a huge part. For some cultures, for my culture, for example, we're not really recognizing that there is sexual harassment. Like that's the whole taboo topic, I would say. Like even sexual relationship with your partner is not that much commonly highlighted, like in news, in your conversations with your best friends, with your parents, basically, is something that people prefer to avoid just because it's like private life. So going and dealing through all these challenges with sexual abuse and harassment can be a very huge part in terms of your religious and cultural background as well.
In this study that I was reading based in Canada, it did note that international students are less likely to report sexual violence when it was from a faculty or staff member initiating it compared to domestic students. And I just wanted to note that because I think you noted earlier on, Stacey, that international students might be more hesitant to disclose what has happened to them. And I feel like, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong, or if you guys have your own ideas on why this may be, but I feel like international students might have a lot to lose in this kind of situation when it's from faculty, just because you come here to study and then there might be this fear that if you disclose, it might affect your studies, it might affect if you're able to complete your degree or anything like that. And then if that does happen, then it's kind of like, what now, right? So I feel like that might be a very scary challenge some international students might face.
Yeah, just knowing that your faculty or professor, they have this power over you, so it's definitely a big struggle for disclosure as well.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I feel that I would like to add to what Stacy just mentioned previously, that we don't, these are taboo topics, sexual violence and harassment and stuff. So people don't really talk about it. And especially in my culture, being sexually active before marriage is looked down upon. So there's even that fear that if we report this, and what if we have to take further steps, and what if our family and our friends and our community gets to know about it? Then there
Mm-hmm.
is th- there's this whole different, uh, I would
Aspect.
say, aspect of it that makes it much more challenging for them to come out.
Right. I feel like going back a little bit onto why international students might be more vulnerable. In the same study, the same Canadian study, it had over 6,500 student participants, and they found that international students are more likely to experience sexual violence across various demographics, including age, gender, sexual orientation, grade levels, and time spent at university. So basically, in other words, international students who fit under those demographics were more likely to experience sexual violence than the domestic students within those same demographics. And I think in our work, we talk a lot about intersectionality and how that matters, just because, yeah, we have all these different labels, and then the being kind of this minority group, I suppose, there's less international students than domestic students. It does put a bit of a target on you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel
definitely.
that's
Go
definitely
ahead.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as we said again, we don't know the resources. We don't know how to go about how things work in a new country. That makes international students much more vulnerable to these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the coming in without having, I suppose, the context or knowledge on what to do. We've been talking about finding these resources. In that article, they talked about even when international and domestic students had similar context and disclosure patterns, international students were still reported having more PTSD symptoms following sexual violence incidents. So it was 12% of international compared to 8% of domestic. And from that, the international students were less likely to seek help or psychological support from their university. So I think it's kind of what you guys were talking about on maybe not wanting to disclose about whether it's like this cultural barrier, or maybe there's the fear of repercussions and things like that, or maybe not even recognizing, as Vikrant was saying before. But yeah, I suppose maybe, I don't know if either of you have any ideas on how we can maybe change that, either with some prevention strategies, or how we can tailor our own program or resources on campus to better include international students and their experiences, and how we can reach out to them more.
Yeah, one of our initiatives was around conducting the focus group regarding international students and their experiences in terms of sexual violence prevention programs and everything. But I feel like there is this ongoing struggle of getting people to participate. So basically, our idea with another CP was to tailor 1 or 2 initiatives just specifically for international students to make it more inclusive, more tailored to their needs, just to get their experiences, their feedback, and integrate it to create the whole event regarding like sexual violence prevention education and international student experience in addressing like this and this and this. So my thought is the same, just create more initiatives, try to reach out directly to international students, center collaborate with the international students assistance or like office itself, just to make this connection between like our program and the existing international center, just to acknowledge like the diversity of international students and their backgrounds and their needs, to make these ongoing adjustments in our current programming and like our current outlines that are available for all Humber students, but it doesn't maybe really align with the needs for specifically international students.
I agree. And I think, as we were also talking about before, having that list of resources, like I know a lot of Humber resources give out their information cards, but like you were saying, it's easy to lose them and lose track. You forget about them. So having a really comprehensive list would be quite beneficial. And as we also suggested before, maybe having someone check up on you every once in a while, maybe send you a team message being like, hey, is everything going okay? Reminder that we have these services and things like that could also be really helpful. And I also think it's just really important that universities in general have more diverse people within their resources, within their counselors and things like that. People that understand the culture that people are coming from and where where their mindset might be, because I feel like it would be difficult going into a counseling session having all these problems and then also having to explain your own culture to this person and why that is important to the context, right? So that's why I think, diversity is really important amongst staff as well.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
true.
Just having this sense of like, okay, we're from the very same background, and it is easier to make this initial advancements in the counseling. It's crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky, for bringing up this diversity part. It's integral.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. And I would like to also mention the fact that if we would have more like better coverage, insurance-wise, healthcare coverage, that would take a lot of things off of our mind. And I'm sure like most of the students wouldn't mind paying a little bit more for their insurance coverage since we are already paying the fees. And I think this would be an added investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I for sure know people that have gone around with like a twisted ankle and stuff just because they didn't want to go back to the doctor because they're like, oh, I already used up all my insurance and I don't feel like, getting it checked out. And it shouldn't be that way. Like, yeah, it shouldn't be that way because then that busted ankle can then just be lifelong problems. But just because they can't afford it and the insurance wasn't covering it, then they're now for life with these issues, right?
That's true.
Mm. And a similar thing could be said with mental health problems as well, right? If you're having these issues and you're letting it prolong and prolong just because you can't afford it or you don't have access to free counseling or anything like that, then you're just
Mhm.
left with these problems building and building and eventually snowballing.
Yes. And that would in turn affect your friends and family in a way, in your relationship with your friends and family.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it would affect, yeah, it affects everything too. Like if you're here for
Hmm.
school, it'll also affect your grades. And then how it's kind of
True.
like a back and forth, right? Like if your
Yeah,
health is affecting everything in your life, and then if everything in your life is changing, that's affecting your mental health. And it's kind
yeah,
of,
it's a vicious cycle.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. All right. Well, I don't know if anyone has any final thoughts that they want to talk about before we close up for today.
No, I feel like it was a great conversation around mental health, well-being, experiences, being international students, and it's really important topic to talk about. And I hope that people that will be listening to our podcast will find some support, maybe in our past experiences, or will get some maybe some goal to seek for more help if they need, not to postpone it, and advocate for their mental health basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. I just hope that it helps my community in any way. It helps uh, coming students for the next semester to find resources, seek help, and absolutely anything at all.
Mm-hmm. I and then I just want to say, because we are finishing up now, that if any listeners are having do need any support, there's the Student Wellness and Accessibility Center that they can look to for counseling, and they could also find us, the Consent Peer Education Program, if they want to talk to us about any experiences or any advice and things like that. And there's also the International Student Center that they can go to with any inquiries about coming into Canada and their studies and things like that. So yeah, thank you both so much.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Vikrant.
Yeah, thank you so much.